Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I hope you're having a wonderful Thursday so far. My name is Laura Clark, and I'm the Marketing Coordinator here at SmartSimple. I want to welcome you to our second webinar of 2018, but the first topic of 2018. Today we'll be walking you through how to take control of user roles and permissions in your SmartSimple platform. Whether you are self-taught and want to be sure you haven't missed anything, or only just beginning to look at modifying permissions, this webinar is definitely for you. Before we begin, I wanted to thank many of you who filled out the Community Engagement Survey. As you may have read in our January newsletter, based on your feedback, we will be organizing our webinars into quarterly themes that will give you a sort of comprehensive overview of each subject. To start the year and lay the foundation for your system security, the webinars for this quarter will center around security. Don't forget to register at smartsimple.com/events, and be sure to look out for a lot of great content we have planned for you in 2018. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to today's presenter, Jason Ewer. He's one of our technical community support representatives and began at SmartSimple over a year ago. He currently offers Level 2 premium SmartSimple support services to 3 organizations. You're welcome to ask your questions during the webinar by typing it into the chat box within your Zoom console. Otherwise, feel free to ask all of your questions over the phone at the end. And now I'll pass it over to Jason to get started.
Hi everybody. Thank you, Laura, for that introduction. So as you know, today's our roles webinar. I just want to go over a little bit about what we're going to cover today. So our learning objectives for today, we're going to cover the importance of role-based access control. We're going to look at how to create and assign roles to users and how to use those roles to manage user access to different aspects of the system. And finally, we'll do a demonstration showing the use case of this involving the difference in user experience between someone with a reviewer role and someone with an applicant role. So the first thing we need to look at is the importance of roles in the system. So roles are the main method of controlling security, interface, and functionality within SmartSimple. And user access to system resources like file folders, discussions, calendars, UTAs, the notes function, even reports they're all controlled by permissions, and roles are one of the security systems that allow users to get access to those permissions. And roles are also important for controlling the user's homepage interface, although that won't be discussed as much in this webinar. That's a separate webinar topic. And so that description was kind of like an abstract introduction to what roles are, but what you were interested in is like what the value is to your business and your business process. So at the end of the day, the real value of roles is that they truly allow SmartSimple to adapt to your business process, because it's one thing for a system to record and manage the data, but if it can't follow the process for your organization, it's not that useful. So with roles, you can set up the security and visibility of different pieces of data based on how you want each user in your system to function. For example, you can use role-based permissions and the UTA security matrix, also a subject of another webinar, to make sure that certain users can only have access to certain records as opposed to others. And you can make submit buttons only visible to application owners. You can make it so that reviewers have access to the annotation function so that they can leave notes on an application for other people to view. So the next thing that I'd like to go over with you is the types of roles in the system. So there are 2 main types. There are system roles and there are UTA roles. System roles are roles that are assigned as part of a user's contact profile, and UTA roles are roles that can be assigned to a contact in a UTA when they're assigned to a record. And so the main difference is that for UTA roles, they're context specific. So for example, a user might be playing the role of project leader, but only for a specific project. So you don't necessarily want to give him a separate system role called project leader, but you want his behavior on the record to reflect that. So you can specify a role as UTA role only when creating it in the user roles menu, and then UTA roles can be used to manage the access and edit permissions of the specific records that they relate to. So now I'm just going to go over briefly like the process of creating a new role in SmartSimple. So if you wanted to create a new role, you'd go to the main menu, then you go to the roles and securities option, then user roles, and then you'd click the create new role button. And then once you click that button, you'll see a screen like what I've shown on the slide here. So that screen is the screen for when you're making a new role. There are two tabs. In the general tab, you can put down information like the role's name, if you want to write a description for what the role is going to be, if you want to enter a role formula. And then if you look at the toggles, you'll see there's one toggle that says UTA role only, and that's where you would specify it as a UTA role only or not. And in the permissions tab, you would have the ability to specify like what roles people in this role can set, and who they can activate, and if they can set passwords for them. So once you've created a role, then you'd want to assign it to different users. So on the slide on the screen, I've shown you there are two different ways that you can assign roles to users. So first, you can add it through the current users in the role settings itself. So if you look at the picture on the left, you see there's a tab called current users when you're looking at a role. And in that current user tab, it will list all the users that do have that role assigned to them, and you can use that blue plus button to open a lookup to add more users to that. Alternately, you can select the roles and access option in a contact record. So you navigate to the contact record, click the options button, and then click roles and access. And you see that on the screenshot on the right. And then when you click roles and access, it'll open up a box where there are checkboxes representing each role, and you can check off which system role you want to apply to the person. And then the next thing I'd want to go over with you guys is just how you can use roles to control system functionality. So as a system admin, you can use the roles to control user access to large-scale system functionality, like high-level privileges within the company and user records, and access to certain menus and features like emulation mode. So these are largely controlled within the system feature permissions and system visibility settings within global settings option in the main menu. And so if you look at the picture on the left, I've highlighted where you would go in global settings to find these options. So you go to your main menu, then global settings, then click the security tab. And then most of those are covered in the system feature permissions and system visibility permissions that I've highlighted. And on the right, you can see a screenshot of what the system feature permissions menu actually looks like. So you see there are several tabs for the different kinds of permissions that you would delineate by role. And then within each tab, if you look at the disable resend / action bar section, you see that there's a lookup, and in that lookup you can select what roles you want to have that permission. And then the other thing you can use your roles for is to control access to custom fields and buttons. Now, on the within a UTA, you can use the roles to drive the business process by controlling those. So, for example, you can permission an approval button to only be seen by a reviewer, or a submit button to only be seen by an applicant. And because of the configurability of the SmartSimple platform, with a proper setup, it can really be adapted to the needs of your business. So in the picture, you can see that for a particular custom field, the donation type custom field, in the permissions and availability tab of that custom field, you can use the lookups in that role field permission section, and you can use them to define what roles can view or modify the field, or if you wanted to, you could use it to deny view or deny modify for that field. Okay, and so that concludes the kind of introductory presentation I had for you guys. So what we're going to look at now is an actual use case of the difference in experience between someone with like an applicant kind of role and a reviewer role. So for that, we're actually going to go into our system. So this is our demo system, and right now I'm logged in as someone with the system admin role, and I'll just show you that right now. So when I go into my roles and access, you can see that I have some administrative roles, and I have my system admin role right here. And another thing I just quickly like to go over with you is that as a system admin, you see that I have kind of a high-level overview of the system, and that's as my homepage, and that's covered. That's because I have a particular portal, which is another role-based feature. So what we want to do is I'm going to quickly show you a particular record from the system admin point of view, and then we'll look at it from the point of view of the actual applicant. So here I've gone into my UTA and I've selected a particular application. This application, the contact is Stephine Makami. And so in this application, you can see that I can see all these fields. And if I go into edit mode, as a system admin, I have access to a particular set of buttons down here, right? And I'd also just like to let you know, just want to point out that this application is in draft status right now, and that will come in to play in a little bit. Now, what I would like to bring to your attention is, as a system admin, if you look at the tabs at the top, we have access to a tab on the far right called Webinar Review. And in Webinar Review, we have access to kind of like a feedback field where people can leave their thoughts on the webinar. Now, these, as I said previously, these are all controlled by our role-based permissions. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to show you the difference between what we're seeing now and what the actual applicant is seeing. So if we go back to the main tab, and we're gonna emulate, or we can actually log into the system as Stephine. Okay, so we're logged in as Stephine, and as you see, her homepage loads, and you see that her homepage is very different to what we were seeing as a system admin. Now let's go into that record. All right, so we're in the record as Stephine. The first thing we can see is that she doesn't have access to that tab on the far right that we had access to as a system admin, the webinar review tab. And I can and in just a short moment, I'll show you like where that was controlled. Now, she doesn't have access to that tab. And let's also look at the edit button. So once we hit edit, we go down to the so we go down to the buttons at the bottom of the screen. You see that Stephine has access to a submit my application button that we didn't have as a system admin. And again, that's something that's covered, that's controlled by roles. So what we're going to do is I'm going to submit the application as Stephine. All right, so you see it's submitted now. She no longer has access to any buttons. I'm going to so now that that's submitted, I'm going to go back as a system admin, and we're going to look at where those two features were controlled. So if we go to our UTA, the grants UTA, first let's look at where the fields were controlled. So if we go to the configuration settings and then the custom fields, the level 1 custom fields, we go to our correct version. And let's use Control and F to find webinars. So you see at the bottom there are two fields, webinar review, which is the title bar, so it's the tab, and webinar feedback, which is that text box field. And if we go into webinar review and go into the permissions and availability tab, so here you'll see in the role field permission section, it's only set up so that the system admin can see it. And you notice the same thing for the second field. So if we go to the next field, webinar feedback, we go to permissions and availability. You'll see that it's set up so that only the system admin can view it. Now let's look at where that button, that submit my application button, was controlled. So if we go back to the configuration settings for grants, we go to the level 1, we go to submit and save buttons. Now if you remember, this is the name of the button, submit my application. So if you hit edit, you'll notice that if you scroll down to the middle of the page, there's a particular visibility condition. Now this visibility condition says this particular syntax, so at me.enroll organization contact means that it's looking for the person in the system role of organization contact, or this other role, federal grant contact. Now, if you're not absolutely strong on the syntax, what you can also do is you can use the lookup down here, the role field permissions lookup, to actually permission that. So what I'll do is I'll show you what the lookup would look like. So just give me one sec. Yeah, sorry, just give me a second to share it. Okay, there we go. So this is what the role lookup would look like, and within it you can check off any number of your roles, then hit OK, and then it would be reflected in the field. Oops, sorry, just give me one sec. Okay, yeah, so sorry about that brief. I just had to switch my share. So right, so we're back in the button. So like I was saying, if you use that role lookup and then hit OK, the role selected would generate here, and you can save it, and it would be the same thing as updating that visibility condition. Okay, so what we can do now is we're gonna take a look at that grant again. So if we go back to the grant and we go into the contacts on the grant, you notice that here there's another person who's on there, Jason Webinar, so he's on there as a reviewer. So what we can do is we can log in as him. And so this person should have, as someone with the reviewer role, actually, let's go in and let me show you that. So as someone with the reviewer role, Jason Webinar will actually be able to use the annotation function. So here you see he has the reviewer role here. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna log out as Stefan and log in as him. So we've navigated back to Stefan's screen, we're logging out, and we're using Jason's credentials. Just give me 1 second so I can get it back to a familiar view for you. Okay, so here you can see Jason as a reviewer has a section on his portal for submitted applications. So if we go there, you see that Stefan's application is now showing up. So if we click that and we enter this application, in the submitted status, we should have an option to, if you look at any of the fields, you'll see that we have an option to actually turn on annotation mode and use it and actually make new annotations for anyone to see. So you can say, I reviewed the application, then we can save it, and you can see it's on there for other people to see. You can also read annotations that were left behind by other people. For example, if we go to the project budget field, you can see that Eric has previously left annotations on this record, and as someone who's permissioned appropriately, you can see that. So what we need to do now is we need to look at where that was configured in the system. So we're going to go back to our system admin view. Now, the annotation function is covered in two main places. So the first place is within global settings, there's an option for annotation types. So you go to annotation types, you look at the particular type that you want to permission. You go to the permissions and availability tab. Under here, there are two sections for view and create and view only. So right now I have it set up so that the system admin, staff, and reviewer roles can view and create that particular annotation. And what you'd also do is you'd go into the UTA, so you'd go into the grants UTA. You'd go to configuration settings and you'd look at the particular status. So we're going to go to application and statuses. And if you remember, Stephane's application was submitted, so it would be in the submitted status. So we go to edit that. And then we look at the permission and availability tab. And so if I scroll down here, so you can see better. So if I scroll down here, you see that there are about 4 different options for the annotation permissions. And what I've done is I've gone through and I've put the roles in to match the roles that were on the particular annotation type. So the system admin, staff, and reviewer all have the view and create option. They can edit the field in annotation mode, and they can own the record in annotation mode itself without having to turn it on. So that is why, as a reviewer or JSON webinar user was able to see the annotations that were left previously and these new ones of his own. So that's a powerful function for if you if you have people who need to review applications, and it makes it so much faster than having to like manually go in and maybe like jot down notes like separately on like a Word document or something. Yeah, but that about concludes the demonstration that I had for you guys. But if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to try and field them right now.
And thank you so much for that, Jason. The first question is, can the same person be assigned to multiple roles?
Yes, so the same person can actually be assigned to multiple roles, and if you remember, or the contact that was on Stephane's application, Jason, so I'll show you his contact record. So if you go into roles and access on his contact record, you see he has 3 different roles: reviewer, staff, and system admin. So you can definitely assign the same person to multiple roles, and normally it's more permissive. So like if you have someone with the system admin role and that same person has like a role that has less permissions, the system admin role would take precedence, and that way it kind of reduces any conflicts or anything.
Okay, great. The next question is, where are the security permissions?
Sure. So there are two main areas that you can look to find your security permissions. The first, in terms of roles at least, there's security permissions for the system as a whole, but that's another topic as well. So with regards to roles, you can set it up with right here. In this section, there's an option for user security matrix where you can use roles to kind of determine what actions somebody can take within the hierarchy of users. So for example, if we wanted to, we could look at having our system admin, and we could really define what they can do for users, like if they can view users, edit them, even look them up. Alternately, if you go into the UTA itself, and you go to the configuration settings, you go to security. There's a UTA security matrix also coming up in or next webinar, I believe. So you can look out for that one. But within the UTA security matrix, you can look at how your system roles and your UTA roles function within the UTA itself. So you can say that maybe like this particular UTA role can view applications, but you might not want it to have the edit option, or so on and so forth. You can also, even within the same security tab, you can delineate. You can define access to the UTA itself. You can define administrator access, so on and so forth. So it really be within this area that you do a lot of that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. And the next question is, what does UTA stand for?
Sure. UTA is Universal Tracking Application. So that really just refers to like your grant manager, your submission manager, any of these applications on the left there. That would be what UTAs are.
Okay, perfect. Next question is it possible to go back and edit the roles of a contact, specifically to add another role for an existing system admin?
To add another role for, yes, yeah, you definitely can. So if you go back to, let's go back to Jason. So Jason does have the system admin role, but you can always throw on other roles onto him, and it's additive. So we could put the program officer system role, or we could give him the organization contact system role. And once you hit save, those changes are captured, and he'll have access to like whatever permissions those roles would have allowed for other users. He will now have access to.
Okay, perfect. Next question is the interface you are using. Is it the Arcadia version?
Yes, this is Arcadia.
Okay. Next question is, what are the common best practices for determining the number or types of roles?
Sure. So, excuse me. What I would suggest is to kind of think of your business process and try and simplify it as much as possible. And then once you've come up with clear-cut functions for your users within the system, then you make roles for each clear-cut function. For example, if we look at our user roles or list of user roles, if for example there's an employee role and there's several users, but they all have different titles, but so their real life job function might be different, but their purpose within the system, all these people are going to act the same way. So for simplicity's sake, you make one role, call it employee, and you give these people that role, because at the end of the day, they're all going to serve the same function, and that's how you really keep that's how you kind of maintain like a tidy system, or like a very organized kind of process for your system.
Okay, the next question is, can two roles be combined?
What do you mean by combined, Sandra?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if the person who asked that question would like to clarify exactly. Do you mean combining system admin with another role, or do you mean assigning them two roles at once? So we'll wait for that person to clarify. Thank you so much for that question. We'll move on to another question for now. What are some common conflicts in multiple roles? The most common one I've seen is just visibility, because sometimes we'll get questions from system admins or end users like why a user can't access a particular application, or they don't see the button to submit something, or they're not seeing a certain functionality. And most of the time it comes down to whatever that function is or that button is wasn't permission for that user because of like whatever role they're in. Because I've seen cases where in a particular instance, an application, like for users to apply, they have to have one of two roles, and we get users calling in saying they were instructed to apply for a particular kind of scholarship,
but they don't actually have the right role for it. So at that point, it's then, you kind of have to manually add that role onto them.
Okay. And so we've got some clarity on that last question about assigning two roles to one person. So assigning two roles to one person as in realizing that the two roles are very similar, there's lots of overlap, so this user is wishing to combine to streamline the system. So is there a way to kind of create an overlap, almost one role that combines into two roles?
I've never, I can check if Sandra, you mean to literally merge them. I can check if that's possible. I can definitely check and get back to you on that. But I think like if you have two roles that are very similar, you can just pick one to kind of move forward with. Okay, give me one sec.
Yeah, so the person asking this question just clarified. So it's merging and then deleting one of the roles to make it just the one role that you have to refer to.
Okay, I've never come across like the need to merge two roles and delete the other one. Normally what I've seen happen is if an update to the business process is made, or you do realize that you'd rather move ahead with one particular role rather than the other, they normally just kind of redo everything that was set up for that initial role. So for example, if you have employee and then you want to make a role new employee, you just give new employee to all the users that had the previous old employee role. And if there's anywhere in the system where, let's say, the employee role was getting a notification, you just go back in there and update it for the new employee role. And then normally they just make a note on the employee role that it's kind of deprecated. I don't know if there's a merge function, but I can check and get back to you, like a little merge function, but I can check and get back to you on that one, Sandra.
Great. Okay. So we've made a note about that. When an applicant registers in the system for the first time, what roles are automatically assigned to the new user, and where can you find this in the system?
Cool. Okay. So there isn't a default. It's kind of up to you as the system admin to set the default. So if you go to, let's say, your global settings and users, and you look at your sign-up pages, trying to see one. So okay, so within your sign-up page on the general tab, if you kind of scroll down to the bottom, there are options where you can set it up so that if a user uses that particular sign-up page and completes the submission, once that process is done, the content that created automatically gets a particular role. Alternately, what you can also do is here, there's an option that says attach workflow, and there isn't one selected right now, but what you could also do is you could make a workflow to say, when this workflow is triggered, you can update the contacts with whatever role. So, I mean, those are two options that you can have, but again, there isn't anything that's defaulted. It's like, as a system admin, you've the option to kind of make that choice based on whatever your business process is.
Okay, so the next question is, does the system have a role that is read-only, where a user has access to view but not change anything in the system?
Well, you can make that. Excuse me, I'm sorry about that. You can make that role. So, for example, let's see here. So is it that, I'm sorry, so whoever that asked that question, is it that they don't want that role to see any fields, or you want to be able to pick and choose what fields they want to see?
Yeah, so the question was they want a user to have access to view it, but not change anything in the system, similar to maybe Google Docs.
Okay, yeah, so what you can do is, for whatever role you set up, if you go into your UTA and you go into your configuration settings, for the fields, you can, the same way we discussed earlier, you can, for that particular role, you can add it under allow view, but not under allow modify, and then that role will only be able to view your certain fields. Also, I believe you can set up a I can follow up with you on that, but I think you can also set up a field matrix, which is like kind of a pre-done set of rules, and you can just add that to certain fields. And so in your field matrix, you could always say that, hey, I don't want this role to be able to edit. And so for all the fields that have that field permission matrix on there, that rule will be applied.
Okay. Next up, if the business needs change and you need a particular role to have visibility to a field they currently don't have access to, do you update the role to include that specific field?
Well, you don't. It's less that you update the role. It's more like you update the field. So in this same area, in let's say in the allow view, let's say maybe previously it only had system admin, but if you need to update it to say the staff one, you can always just check it off and save the field, and it'll capture those changes. I mean, it's less that you like update the role. It's more like you update the permissions of whatever you're trying to look at. If that makes sense.
Thanks, Jason. What I believe is the last question. If anyone else wants to ask any more, please be sure to add it to the Q&A box within your Zoom console. Is there a way to limit a role's visibility by status?
Okay. You can limit role visibility on lookups, but not by status, I don't think. I'm not sure if that is controlled by status, but there are other areas in the system where you can limit role visibility in terms of certain lookups. So, for example, if you go to let's say the contact standard field, the same place that we put down Jason as a reviewer before. So if you go into that standard field, there's an option that says lookup roles, and here in this lookup is where you can say like what roles are available to be like searched by. So if we give me one sec. If we were to duplicate our tab and go to that same application, so we don't have edit, right? We don't have edit access right now, but basically the lookup here is controlled by this standard field, and you can in these two lookups you can say I want all the users from all these roles to be available when somebody is looking up right here. And also, if you want to assign UTA roles, you can permission that in this section, and so you can say I want all these roles to be available as a UTA role when somebody is assigning them in this standard field. So that's one way to kind of limit what roles are available. If, for example, like you might have employees that don't need to see all the roles in the system, they only need to see maybe 3 roles because those are the only 3 roles they'll be working with. That'd be a good way to do it.
Okay, now while we're waiting for any more questions to come in, I just wanted to be sure to remind everyone to register for the rest of our security webinars to ensure you get a comprehensive overview of each subject. You can register at smartsimple.com/events. So we'll be having webinars that expand on the topic today. So defining your security in the UTA security matrix, as well as how do you organize your access. So that will be working within the company and contact security matrix. So to make sure you have full visibility into your security settings, we highly recommend these webinars that are coming up over the rest of the quarter. Okay, so we haven't had any more questions come in, but if you have any more, the SmartSimple support team are always here to help. Thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time to join us for taking control of your user roles and permissions. We hope you found the material useful. And if any questions pop up along the way, Jason and the SmartSimple support team are, as I said before, always here to help. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day.